Oh, hi guys, we're here today with Robbie and Israel, and we're talking best practices. I'm Valley from Greenwood Solutions and Greenwood Academy. We're having a very robust conversation about all things best practice from the perspective of domestic solar installations and off-grid, and of course commercial solar. Robbie, I got to ask, do you have to do CPD points as well, like the rest
and
of us?
what can be annoying is sometimes I have to check the CPD points before it goes out, and then I have to do it again to get my points. So, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's what we call leading by example.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. That's great.
Well, you were saying before, you've got to keep learning. I think in this industry, we've got to keep learning.
The changes are so radical and so quick. I suppose in saying that, solar panels don't seem to have changed very much compared to, say, other things, like compared to, say, energy storage, the density, the size, the size of the batteries and the price. And I think nowadays there's a real emphasis on communication between the different devices and the different inputs. The comms is the key, and the Sparky's got enough on his plate with having to learn different inverter systems, but then when you start incorporating battery storage systems and other inputs, flywheels, which is another form of storage, even wind and microhydro, etc., you have to have a system and understand how it all comes together. And we're finding that a lot of the Sparkies nowadays are struggling in that area, just trying to bring everything together from a best practice perspective. Yeah,
I disagree with you about the panels a little bit. Like, I've been around, you guys have both been around, we were doing 190s, 175 watt panels that were this big, this wide. Now we're at 400 or 500 watt panels that, unless you know the clamping zones to put them on a domestic roof, you might not even be able to install them compliantly. So the tile roofs in Australia have battens that are certain spaced apart to try and match that up with the manufacturer's specified clamping zones. Potentially, if you don't do it right, from day one, you've voided the warranty of that panel.
That's a good point. I was more from the perspective of the actual efficiencies of the panel. Like when I started, they were 11, 12, 13%. And they've gone up. I think there's something out there that's, what is it? I won't mention the brand. I think they're hitting 28%. It's experimental. But a decent panel is 21, 22%. Compared to energy storage in regards to energy density, there's no comparison. But you're right, the panels are certainly bigger.
Yeah.
And from a best practice perspective, how big is too big for a one-person lift?
20 kilos. It's work health and safety requirements. Anything over 20 kilos is supposed to be two-person lift.
And you'll find that in the commercial sphere, all the panels are over that
way.
Yeah,
even in domestic, everything's over 20 kilos nowadays.
So how does the installer get around that? When I say get around, best practice.
2 people teams on the roof. You load it onto a panel lifter, you unload it with 2 people from the roof and place it down in place.
That's just hire backpackers, don't you?
Yeah. Best practice we're talking.
Best practice.
Yeah, no comment. That's it's a funny one, but I want some clarity on this, because if you are lifting over, there are occasions in the industry, not this industry necessarily, where you are lifting over 20 kilos and people are doing it by themselves. So it's not an actual well, is it a regulation?
I'd have to go back and look at it, but my understanding is in the OH&S Act, there'll be some weights. But because also 20 kilos in a small square box is different to 20 kilos that's a giant sail that you're carrying across the roof.
Yes.
If we're talking about best practice, I think you've got to document everything. We talked about it before, processes. Like if it's a nice still day and it's a flat roof and it's nice and dry and there's no breeze, maybe one person can carry a 20 kilo panel 10 metres to the far end of the rail. But as soon as you've got that slope or there's a bit of moisture or there's a breeze, I think we all know what a solar panel's like when there's a little bit of breeze.
Look, it's a good point, because if we're talking from a domestic perspective, when the average roof is going to, let's say we're talking tile, they're going to be no less than 19 degree pitch. So there's a lot of stress on the installer from you got one leg up and one leg down. Compare that to a commercial roof where you may be 5 degrees or less. Yes, you've got the ribs to contend with, but it's a little bit easier to walk. But on the negative side, you're up a lot higher. And I've personally experienced right at the end of my installation times, because I'm so bloody old now, that in the afternoon, there's certain areas where the sea breezes come up, and you're the EWP is at 13 metres is like that. You're on the roof and you're going, oh, this is too much, where you wouldn't really experience that on a domestic roof, even well, maybe 2-story, but it's usually a bit more built up, so you've got a lot of, you haven't got a laminar flow of wind, you've got more of this sort of like turbulent wind. It's a bit of a worry though, isn't it? Like the whole handling panels.
My understanding with a lot of our, safety guidelines and that sort of thing in our country, it's very much, sadly, liability driven, but that's ultimately what it comes down to when it comes to insurance, right? So there's not a whole lot of hard and fasts as much as there is. You have to have it documented, as you said, is the key word, right? How you're going to go about it. And then when the time comes, if you hurt yourself doing it the way you've documented it, sort of thing, then maybe it was inadequate. And that's when you're in the sticky situation that you don't want to be with work cover or your insurer or something like that. And that's really the word for all the, dare I say it, the smaller contractors, which really I'm in that boat too, who run the gauntlet, a lot of the time. Oh, she'll be right, like I'm comfortable doing this. I've been doing it for 20 years, every day of my life. But that day when things do come a cropper and they hurt themselves, that's when you don't want to be finding out that work cover's like, well, I'm sorry, you really didn't give due consideration in your safety systems because, you might have felt a lot of the time strong enough to lift, 120 kilo panel on each side or something like that, back in the Wild Wild West days when we used to try and carry 2 panels at a time onto the roof. And, it's just...
But you'd have that in the swims, like
that's the thing.
And that's the thing. You've got to have your swims.
Yep.
You've got to have your documentation, especially if you've got, like for instance, we've got an ISO accreditation in that area and a few others. So they're very strict about that. And even from just a purely OH&S perspective, you have to have that documentation.
Absolutely.
And all documentation is a living document, like the Australian standards, and created by fallible people. So there will be improvements down the track. It's because we all know people are lifting panels way heavier than 20 kilos on the roof. And these panels are getting really big. Like, I won't even talk about the ones they're putting on the solar farms that are like ridiculous size, but that's a different dynamic. I don't know. I mean, on domestic, what sort of size panels are you seeing on the domestic? What's the big, like 450s? Are they 500s at all? Are they going,
but you're starting to get like 1,700 mil long, nearly 2 metres long by 1,100 wide sort of thing. That's a big panel. And to try and carry, like we said, flat roof, nice day, maybe no problems. But as soon as you've got any breeze or slope or other weather, you've got to consider it. It might be how you do your work though too. Like if you start off setting up your bottom rails and that way it gives you a bit of a something to work to when you're walking up that roof to lay the top panel. You've got a bit of stuff to put your ankle against is a bit of rail. It's how you process your installations as well. And
it's documenting how you're processing, which is important. Because if you've got no documents and they come to site, they go, they don't even care. But at least if you've got something that's not, even if it's not 100%, at least it's there, and that's a starting point for a conversation.
And I dare say that if people are doing their due diligence, you actually go through and have a safety toolbox meeting. You sit down with other people in your company and you go, okay, let's look at this objectively. How big is this panel? How many people is it going to take to safely get this from the ground up onto the roof there, day in, day out, for the extent of your working life? Then you'd probably come up with some different answers to what people who just don't even stop to think about that, who are just like, I'll just get up there and do the job sort of thing. So that's where I think that those safety documentations should be formulated in that kind of setting, when the company comes together, does the safety toolbox procedure and that sort of thing, and everybody agrees, I think that's fair. I think we could all sustain that for the entirety of our working life. And then once you formulate that, then the rubber hits the road when people have got to follow it day in, day out when they're on the job.
See, this is a really important point, because obviously we've all experienced the tick and flick scenario where you've gone to the trouble creating documentation and people are signing their name, ticking it, but they don't know what the heck they're going on. Right? There's no actual testing or trying to get a valid indication. Do you actually understand what you're doing? And that really, especially in the domestic where there's less chance of, well, maybe there's not less chance of work safe coming, but definitely in the commercial sector where you're really under a lot of scrutiny, and the bigger the jobs you do, the more accreditations you've got, certifications, the bigger the magnifying glass you're under. And at the end of the day, we all want to go home to our loved ones, and that's the crux of anything that we do from a physical perspective. You do not want to be injured or worse, and everything has to come from that. Yeah,
I think having the procedures are really good, but it's got to be site specific as well. Like you've got to redo that when you get there. Like it might be a domestic install where it's all on one face and you can lift pretty easy straight from the ground up to the first lot of rails, and then it's safe. But if you've got somewhere where you've got to traverse a bit of a roof and it's a bit of a slope and there's some slipperiness and breeze, I think you just got to reassess that with your toolbox talk, document it. There's a word in OH&S, it's practical, as far as reasonably practicable. So you've got to make sure if something goes wrong, have I done the best that I possibly could for this site?
And will it stand up in a court of law? That's the other thing.
Will everyone go home? That's the big thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's it. And exactly as both of you have pointed out, really, everybody will go home and they'll be safe to work another day sort of thing. But sometimes the impetus for people to have that in the forefront of their mind is where the law comes into it, right? And so the thing that I was thinking about as you were talking there before, Veli, is the duty of care. So safe work regulation in Australia talks about the duty of care, and there's primary duty of care, which starts with what's called the PCBU, the person conducting the business or undertaking. So ultimately the business owner. And this is where we've seen in recent years industrial manslaughter and those sorts of laws have actually sprung from.
Yep.
And so this is really the key information or communication that needs to get out into the industry, especially in those smaller companies or newer companies in the industry. Business owners need to understand that if they haven't done enough due diligence to ensure everybody within their company has not only the safe procedures but the means to be able to follow them, it could come back to them. They could end up doing jail time ultimately for somebody getting hurt within their company. So it's really important.
It will come back to them.
Yeah, that's right.
This is the thing. There's a lot of things to look in this area, and one is that ratio of A grades to apprentices, and also the age of the year of study of the apprentice and what they can and cannot do unsupervised, and the various levels of supervision. And there's a flow chart that's easily available, but how many people are actually following that? And if something happens to that apprentice, and we all remember that the insulation days when there's a lot of issues there. If something happens to that apprentice, it's a horrible conversation to have with their family, let alone the legal ramifications. It's just, and at the end of the day, as I always say, it's electricity. You can kill you. Yeah. Do things properly. Yeah. It's physically hard work too. Especially the commercial stuff. Yeah. Thousands of panels.
That's right. Yeah.
Horrendous.
We've got to understand just the gravity, the weight of the kind of risk that's associated with the work that we do. Exactly as you say, electricity, with flying objects, if solar panels aren't mounted to fixtures properly, that could kill somebody as well. Energy density in batteries, arc flash had all this sort of thing. Really, again, that's a key communication message to get out to people who are new to industry and that sort of thing. Don't cut corners. Don't want to get out there and try and be the cheapest guy, can undercut the next company. That's just a fast way to the grave for your company, really. Yeah. You need to understand the gravity of these sorts of risks and position yourself appropriately with your pricing, the kinds of customers you take on. Yeah.
Be comfortable to go to sleep at night, I think, is one of the things. If you've done the best you can and you can sleep at night, then that's probably the way. Going back to the topic we're going to hopefully get to is the site assessment as well. If you've got somebody that can do a really good site assessment to start identifying this stuff before you get the call to go and install, that can make a big difference as well. You're not going to go there and go, I can't do this driveway. You've lost hours, potentially a whole day's work for a crew. If you've got something that can do a really good site assessment and the design, that starts to help.
Yeah, true.
Again, this is the documentation thing, and we were talking about it before. These site inspections have to be, I don't know the exact term, but I'll say a point of truth. There should be the project name, there should be the NMI, there should be the meter number, there should be the name of the client, their personal details, etc., all there. Because invariably right at the end, when people are struggling to put together EWRs and COESs and go, who was that person, where was it, and they're where didn't you put that in the project folder? Oh no, I thought you were going to. It has that document, that site inspection document, can serve multiple purposes. And if you really want to drill down on some really good site documentation, site inspection forms, you can actually interrogate the data and get some really interesting stuff out of it as well. And of course, you're going to improve on it next time. You're going to, as I was saying before, every time I look at the site inspection form that I put together, I'm scared because I start adding more rows in that spreadsheet. But, you know, and you do reach a point of marginal diminishing returns when you add too much stuff, but it's really important to have this. And that's definitely best practice. A good site inspection form and personnel who've been trained. And don't select personnel who don't want to do the site inspection. Get people who actually want to do it.
Yeah.
It's a myth trying to make people become this, that and the other when intrinsically that's not their character. You know, their characters are better suited to something else. Don't get them to do the site inspection. Yeah.
Well, it's the foundation, isn't it, to the whole design and installation to follow. The site inspection is that foundation. And so, like, we've been pretty excited at New Energy Training about this actually being a targeted role for industry now. You know, I understand that was quite a key point when the new renewable training units were written and then released at the end of 2022, was they took a new objective approach to it as to how can we restructure this or chop up roles to be able to support, you know, this energy transition, the skills shortages that we're facing and that sort of thing, when it's ultimately electricians and engineers doing the bulk of the work in there. How can we start to have other supportive roles? And that site inspection one is one that's being actively trained into now, so that people, they might be new to industry and they can become really proficient at site assessments and set up the foundation for that ensuing design and install really well.
And you're dead right, Israel, like, and someone has to do the hard yards, let's face it. Like, you know, these people are going to be the recipients of someone else's hard work, someone who's gone out and gone, okay, I've got a site inspection checklist, I've currently got 20 things I'm looking at, that's not enough, I add this, I add this, I add this. That's a valuable document, and it should be treated as such. And the person who buys, purchases, or gets that document should be adding it to, they should be modifying it as well. Because really, when you think about whether it's domestic, commercial, there's so many tasks. There's like hundreds of tasks. In some cases with the big commercial, there's literally thousands of tasks. It depends on how finely you want to divide them, but there's a lot to do. And if you're not writing this stuff down, I mean, I don't know, how is it getting checked and done and what have you? It's really something I've been aware of, you know, doing what I've been doing over the years. And it's really important. So lost for words.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing that was happening in industry, where the Sparkies were going to site and being told to sign off as the design on something they might not ever seen till they rocked up at the address. Now we've got a workforce that can actually participate in the whole flow chain of the renewable energy, and it's a career progression as well. Start off as a system designer, do your site assessment, and then you can move up, learn more. Like we say, you're always learning, and this just means other people can learn now with us as well.
It's a really good point. That's a really good point, actually. I'll have to.
Well, it was, you know, you'd get, I don't know, not picking on uni kids, but let's use uni kids sitting in front of a computer with a Google map or an address, and they're doing the whole design, and then that's getting shipped off and installers being told to install it.
It's a hard thing, isn't it? Because, like, even if it's domestic, really the ideal situation is, let's say Israel's doing an installation, and I'm referencing you because you're right next to me, and you know, you go to site, and before you get on the roof, you're handed your A3 folder, laminated. Here's a recipe book. Go make a sponge. Substitute the word sponge for install a 5 kilowatt system. You know exactly what's going on. Now, invariably, there'll be slight modifications, and especially with the bigger jobs, like, and we've had this conversation internally a lot, do you do the cable tray schedule as part of that A3 pack, you know, the site pack? Do you do all the string configurations? Because sometimes, and we've had this happen, HVAC will mysteriously appear in between the initial site visit on that 1 megawatt system you've quoted, and then 5-6 months later after it starts, suddenly you've got HVAC, and hey, those string designs and that rail design and that cable tray design, it has to be modified. But at least there's something there. And I've seen it with previous companies where I work with. The guys had nothing, and they start to get frustrated with the people back in the office. Now, if you're a single, if you're a small operator, you'll have to put together your own pack. But at least have something and then improve on it. And the beautiful thing is it's a document that can be used as part of the customer's manual as well. You don't want to, use things as much as you can, but you got to have a plan. You got to have a recipe. Otherwise, it's like, imagine turning up. I thought it was corrie roof, but it's tile.
Yeah,
and that's happened all the time.
Yeah. Yep.
It's always intriguing to me because a lot of people who are training, especially as site surveyors these days, are often sales representatives for retail companies who have basically been in this practice already for a number of years in industry, but maybe haven't got the formal training for it. And oftentimes it's easy when we're in that role as a sales representative just to see it as, we're just going to visit the customer. And so not even consider our own safety on site. But people need to understand, whilst that might be the customer's home or their business or something like that, for you, it's your workplace once you step onto that site. People are often quite surprised at how thorough it can be done when they sort of go, they're scratching their heads thinking, what sort of hazards could I be up against? All I'm doing is going to visit somebody's home, I wonder if either of you guys, Robbie and Belly, have got any thoughts in this regard, any of those often overlooked hazards that people could come up against, even on a typical domestic or commercial premises. And a little bit like we were discussing earlier, we really have that obligation to look after not only our own safety, but others that we might be working with. And it would be a sad case if you just hadn't taken the time to do your due diligence on a basic risk assessment before going onto a site. You end up getting hurt, and then you struggle to get work cover or insurance or something like to cover you while you're recovering to get back into work.
One that drops in my mind straight away, going to site in a car to do your site assessment is different to the installer coming along in a van and a truck and a trailer with the gear. So you've got to look at where can I safely set up my car, park the car to do the install as well. So I think having that in mind, that you might go there in your little car and park in the driveway, where does the installer set up? So you've got to think of that as well. Take photos. Is it a court? Is it a narrow driveway? Is it somewhere you're going to be blocking off neighbours? Have a think about that.
That's a great point, mate, because that's what I always like to encourage to site surveyors as well, is that whilst one key point is that they look after their own safety, which is often overlooked, like I was alluding to there before, but then also they're the first person there. There's others who will come after them, like the installers. So it's a great point of efficiency and care for the business to consider theirs as well and be able to give them the heads up before they actually get there. Yeah,
I think that's really important, and it goes up in an order of magnitude when it comes to the commercial side of things. Same applies, but you've got also the access to the site, turning circles of trucks, what size trucks are coming on board. Is there other equipment, EWPs, forklifts, telehandlers? Is the equipment being stored anywhere? Is it insured? Now, on a domestic job, there is situations where the panel, if it's a fairly large one, might be some batteries involved. Where is the equipment being stored? Is it insured while it's on that property? So they're all questions that the designer or the site person doing the site inspection should really ask. But I think Robbie's definitely right. If you're turning up with a tiny little two-seater car, you go, yeah, she'll be right. And the guys are turning up with a four-wheel drive, with a tandem trailer. By the way, it's a court. They can't turn around. There's people working during the day. There's no parking. They find parking 100 metres away. How are they going to get stuff over to here?
The other one, like I was just thinking about the person going to do the site assessment. I don't know if we touch on this or not, but personal safety. Like, is there a situation that could arise through a neighbourhood dispute or something in the house that's going on that you don't know about, and you know how to get yourself out of those situations as well?
Wow.
You've
yeah.
got to protect yourself first and foremost as well. So if you're not comfortable when you're doing the site assessment and something pops up, it's not something you'd necessarily put in the risk assessment, but you've got to be able to say, look, something's come up, I'm going to have to come back. Sorry to the inconvenience. And maybe that's just another thing to be aware of as well. Pretty dark, pretty quick, sorry, but yeah.
No, that's great. And
it's a big thing.
I think it really points to often company culture, and I think especially when we're talking about potentially junior roles, because something like site survey, site assessment, and it comes back to the apprentice point as well that you touched on earlier, Valley. junior roles really need to be protected. Like people often, they might be younger, they might be new to industry, they lack confidence and things like that, and can often feel the weight of responsibility. I'm trying to do a good job here and impress my boss and everything like that. It's important for those kinds of people to know they're valued within the business, that their boss has got their back, sort of thing, and that if they feel uncomfortable or there's a threat to their safety, that they can actually be supported. And it's not going to be the opposite. It's not like their boss or their manager is going to be jumping down their throat and trying to press them into a situation where they're likely to get hurt, for example.
It's incumbent on the A grade to actually look after their charge, not only, mentally and physically, but, dare I say spiritually as well. So they have to be supported, because if you're not supported, why the heck would you go and do it again? You become disillusioned and suddenly you become a carpenter, God forbid.
Mate, when I was a young, fresh-faced apprentice in my first years, I was under a tradesman at the time who was an old pommy bloke. He was 58 at the time, and he'd been a sparky all his life. He'd only ever been out of work 2 weeks when he moved from the UK to Australia. And he was one of those ones when he was during his apprenticeship, 5-year apprenticeship back in the day in the UK, and they'd do college like every 3 nights a week or something like that. But they'd have to ask their journeyman or tradesman or whatever they called them at the time, like if they could go out at night and things like that. So there was very much a heavy, supervision responsibility, but a care, for them, exactly like you're talking about.
That's amazing. Yeah. It's something that people don't really discuss that often. They just go, it's apprentice, it's 4 years, whatever. But it's all about relationships, and because you really don't want to put people off. And look, on a slight aside, imagine you're an apprentice and you're on a commercial job and you've been DC cable tying into cable tray for 2 weeks on your knees, and it's happened, right? It's demoralising. You start thinking, what the heck? And at the end of the day, I'm careful with this term, but you should nurture the human capital, and that we are all human capital. Division of labour, the efficiencies gained only goes so far if people are getting fatigued mentally, physically, and dare I say spiritually as well. It's really that's really important. So apprentices, they're usually young, not always, but they need care and they need to be backed up. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. That's great points.
From the voltage drop perspective, you are looking at now, a maximum shall not exceed 5% and should be not over 3%. And as I try to explain to
Speaking
anyone,
about the furthest PV module back to
absolutely.
the PCE,
And at the end of the day, you've spent all this time putting solar panels down to capture those beautiful rays of the sun, and you want that energy to be lost in the cables before it gets to inverter. And if you're offering, say, a production guarantee or production warranty on a certain percentage of energy being produced by these panels, you better get that cable calculation right. And on the commercial side, you're talking about some very long runs, and even on the domestic, don't stinge on the cable. You just because you'll be caught out because they inspect those things now.
Yeah,
maybe not in Queensland. They don't. The inspector doesn't get on the roof in Queensland, does he?
What inspector?
Why are we laughing?
If you've got a CER audit, they get on the roof. CER audits are very
they're
thorough.
the only inspectors, CER
good.
inspectors in
Because
Queensland.
in Victoria, it's different.
Victoria, we've got I think it's a good scheme where system doesn't get energised until a licensed electrical inspector comes along and inspects your work and signs off on it as well. But they're not the be all and end all either. You've got to take responsibility for your own work.
Oh, absolutely.
And an inspector might not understand the difference between a couple of points of percentage on voltage rise based on a site visit where they might have 5 or 6 inspections to do that day. They're basing it on your calculations and your output, especially on a small domestic. If you start going to a farm where you've got a farm shed that's 30 metres down from the main house, that's where it might get picked up a bit more. And it's critical. It really is critical for the people to understand that. Like the site assessors are going to have to give the right information back to their designers, and when they become designers, they then know, why am I doing this?
Yes.
Wow. Reverse mentoring as well. So you've got to go backwards and forwards between know your installer, know your designer, know your site assessor.
Absolutely, yeah. But you're right. It really is critical because again, if people get trapped up in just thinking about the major components, you know, the solar panels, the inverter, this is how big they are, this is how much energy you can produce, your beauty. But if you've got a kink in the line, so to speak, and it's always helpful to break it down to the basic concepts of like water. This works well for people, right? If you've got a significant, like you've got a fire hydrant, right? Because you've got a massive area, maybe it's in the middle of the city or something like that in a busy street, and you have a fire in that location, there's a lot of people at risk. You want to have a massive fire hydrant to be able to pump that water out as much as possible, put your fire out as quickly as possible. Well, what's the size of your underground pipes that come to that fire hydrant? If they're little 20 mil pipes, you're stuffed, aren't you? It doesn't matter how big your fire hydrant on the end of it is. So that's what we're talking about here, is that you might have a big PV array, you might have a big inverter, but if all your cables in between these components and all the way back out to the grid are undersized, you might as well throw them away. You're wasting all that energy.
Totally agree.
Again, a lot of these great software design tools that we have available to us, you can actually do measuring. You can use a measurement distance tool. So we could actually simulate the distance, thinking about how cable runs, by the way. It doesn't exactly fly like a crow.
And it doesn't go like that.
No, that's right. And so that's another great point, right, for training your people. If you've got junior site surveyors and things, take them along, jump in a roof at some point, get an idea as to how cables might actually run. And then you can simulate, you know, the distance that this cable is likely to run, at least on a, you know, on that sort of lateral plane from an aerial image. That's all we can do. And that's, again, the key point when it comes to site surveyors. Depending on the kind of building that you're dealing with, the importance of being able to get heights, vertical heights, because we can't, a design team can't really adequately assess that on an aerial image. So it's important to get those vertical heights to get an idea of how much extra cable you're going to need to allow for there as well.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry.
Sorry, Robbie. No, go ahead.
If your switchboard's at, 1.8 high and it's a 2.7 ceiling, that's only a couple more meters. But if you've got, 4 meter ceilings in the garage that then drop down, you're adding lots of different cable lengths. People got to understand, like you say, it's not just a draw this is a right angle on this map. You've got up and down, you've got places you can't get around. You've got to go longer rather than shorter, but you've got to calculate that all in.
So for those reasons, and also things like your vent pipes as well, those skinny little vent pipes.
Oh, just cut them off.
How many times do we say that?
That's what you do, is it? Yeah,
just cut them off.
Chuck the excess and put your pedal over the top, That's terrible. You just can't often pick them up on an aerial image like this. Again, like you're saying, Robbie, depending on the resolution as to how clear it is. So I'm always highlighting to people in site assessment training to ensure that they're getting as many photographs, clear photographs of the roof section as well as they can. Now, that's going to be difficult because in some cases, there's no prerequisite or requirement for people to have working at height certification if they're going to be site surveyors. So it's all about what sort of positioning can you get to get those photos. And I do actually advocate for them to carry like a small step ladder, because on single-story dwellings like this, that might get them high enough just to be able to get a photo of the roof section. In the case where you've got sloping sites, you might be able to get up higher than the building. But otherwise, it comes down to using tools like drones and that sort of thing. I was
going to suggest that.
Much more accessible these days.
Yeah, they're really drones, even half-decent ones, are fairly cheap, and they're a tool. But then again, of course, by you have to have a license to fly. I've got a license to fly a drone. It's the little ones, and it was an online thing. I've never actually flown a drone. There you go. So you have to follow that, because if you get caught up using these, especially using these images as marketing material on your website, you could get in a lot of trouble. One other thing, do they have a wood stove? Because particulate matter can come out of wood stoves and actually soil the panels. So that will definitely decrease the production of the panels. And I know we used to ask the question of where, with the off-grid jobs, where your water tank was.
Yep.
Because we used to position the diesel gensets in regards to the prevailing winds in the area, because we know how much that particulate matter can really bugger that up, like a water, like their tanks. But from a wood stove perspective, some of them don't burn that clean, and there's stuff dropping onto the panel. Also, the proximity of the actual vent to the panel. Yep. It's probably not going to melt it, but still, what if the guys are working on site and they put their arm against on a winter day, get a burn?
Yeah.
A lot of that soot sort of sits on the roof as well. So if it does become slippery, if you're working up around those wood-fired chimneys too, it can become very slippery when you're doing the installs.
Like that creosote is, yeah, good point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great point. Even coming back to, as you say, the risk assessment process and the hazards that even a site surveyor can highlight for the install team. That's a great point, Valley. The proximity to, hot items on the roof, like an oven flue. Another really critical one is, that laser light roofing, like your skylight type paneling that people have actually died falling through. So wherever that can be highlighted. And again, for those young ones or junior roles that are not quite familiar with that sort of hazard, how important it is to educate them on it before they encounter it.
Another tool like I use a lot is I've got a selfie stick that I can actually screw a little camera to, and I can control that camera from my phone. So I can actually hold it up or hold it under panels and take the photo based on my phone.
Excellent.
It's really good. Yeah.
That's a beauty.
Well,
sure.
Often when I'm doing inspections, we've got to record a panel label. And if you go to some sites, you might have 3 rows of panels, and the label's obviously the furthest possible place from your arm that you can stick a camera in. So this is just a stick that collapses on itself with a little thread on the top, and I screw a little camera on the top of that, pair it to my phone, and take a photo.
Great idea.
That's life changing.
That's a great idea.
It's the number of photos I didn't need to take down there underneath, trying to reach across and putting on selfie mode, and I can't even see whether it's getting the sticker or not.
That's really good.
Yeah, so you can actually see the live shot of where your camera's sitting and hit a button on your phone that takes the photo using the camera's lens. And it wasn't ridiculously expensive like some of these drones could be, but it's a really good tool to keep, and it packs up pretty small.
You might even be able to, again, like that scenario I was talking about with a single story roof, if you needed a step ladder to get on, you might be able to avoid that. Just hold it up on your selfie
or
stick.
if you're up on the step ladder and you can, using the right methods of safety to be on a step ladder, it can get you that little bit further if you want to try and identify something else.
Because the reality is, if you are using a step ladder, you should have a swim specifically for the use of a step ladder.
Falling from heights is 2 meters is where it's the construction industry term of swims. I agree. Like if you're getting on a step ladder, or if you're going to use an extension ladder, you need to be properly trained.
I remember some of the guys used to carry those telescopic ladders around in the back of their car. The ones that you can.
Have you seen these?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how you go on it, but I reckon I might be a bit bendy when I start climbing up
they
one
look
of those
sketchy
things.
to me, eh? I've not had the
I've been on one. It wasn't too bad, but I'm 79 kilos, so
I reckon you'll be all right. I reckon I might bend it a bit.
You might.
With all the tools and stuff.
Oh, of course.
That
goes without saying.
There's a lot of weight those tools.
Yeah.
Concrete tiles, especially if they're a little bit old, they can be very, very fragile. Old terracotta ones, horrible. We used to have, years ago, extra, as many different profiles as you could, because invariably you will crack them, either drilling them, walking on them, grinding them. They're not as robust as a metal roof. And it's something to be really aware of, and teaching people and having, when it comes to the installation, aware of how to walk on these roofs.
Yeah, really good point.
It's really, because crack, especially if you're a bigger bloke.
Or you're carrying lots of tools again.
Or you carry lots of tools again. Exactly, yeah. I just thought, because I just thought, concrete tiles, that's right. I cracked many of them.
Junior site surveyor is one of the questions, do you have spare tiles? It's great. Or take a photo of the profile and then say, this is the tile. If we're going to potentially break tiles, which nobody wants to, but can happen, can we get some spares?
It's a great one.
That way, if you do break one and it's in a prominent place that's going to be very visible, you take it out and you put it under the panels. But you're colour matching something that's existing so it doesn't stick out. Aesthetics, again, comes into it that way.
Absolutely.
So, it's an easy thing, and you don't necessarily have to get up on the roof to get a bit of a profile picture.
Don't just crack it and squirt some silicon in
there. Especially, down the middle of a tile, and you think it's going to fix it with a bit of silicon.
No. The other thing is too, I think, and this is really important from a more commercial perspective, is a dilapidation report. Because invariably, if you're the last person on the roof and there's a leak, guess what? You're the one who's going to be blamed, despite the fact that there's a gigantic HVAC system that was put in there that's been leaking for a while, but the actual water hasn't gone all the way through. But your luck, a week after you're on the roof, it starts coming through the bloody ceiling, and they will blame you. So a dilapidation report to go, yes, we've found this, this, and this on your roof. We're not responsible. You sign this, Very important.
Like when I'm doing inspections, if I'm getting on a roof, I'll put my ladder up and I look at the roof and I take a photo of the roof. And if there's cracks or cracked tiles or silicon up tiles, I'll not get on the roof until I've actually shown the homeowner that this is an existing thing. Because like you say, the inspector was here last week and now the rain's coming in.
That's it, bloody inspector.
And like water can track a long way.
Absolutely.
Like once it gets into a ceiling, it might not drip straight down on the ceiling where the actual issue is. It might run along under where your solar panels are, and it might not be your fault at all. But the photos, take your photos before, during, after, getting on the roof, getting off the roof.
Absolutely. Whether it's domestic, commercial, the more photos, the better.
100%. And so, we've talked about, right, what happens if you crack a tile. You get your site surveyor right at the beginning of the process, broach that with the customer. Do you have spare tiles available? All right, great. We crack them, we can replace them. So what happens in the case where you run out of spare tiles and you've got cracked tiles?
Well, you can get good flashings nowadays. Like you can get really good flashings, but I'd also move it to a point where it's either under the panel and flashed or somewhere where it's going to less likely to cause damage inside the main dwelling. If it's on the eave, the edge of the garage, somewhere like that, where if it does, fingers crossed it never will, but flush it properly and move it to a place where it's going to do the least damage if it does do damage in 10, 15 years.
And nowadays we're not dealing with the lead flashing. People are using that really thick aluminium flashing, so you don't have to worry about lead, touching lead, which is obviously lead's it's not. I'll start again. Lead's not good.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's it. 100%. Neurotoxin.
That's right, neurotoxin.
So I like to caution anybody who gets a bit starry-eyed, maybe you're an employee of a solar company or something like that, or you're new coming into industry and you think you can undercut the next bloke. You've done your basic sums and it's just not a sustainable way to start a business. And this is another area. It's like, okay, what do you do in that situation? Like the question I posed there, and that was a great suggestion from Robbie, get flashing. Have them on you, have them in your truck. These things cost money. The other thing you can do as well is there's plenty of roofing yards where they have secondhand building materials. You can actually have a stock of, or at least know where to go to get the right tile profile to replace those tiles. And they're not going to be the same colour as the ones on the roof. So that's where you're going to have to consider and have that conversation with your customer and maybe locate them under the panels exactly like Robbie was saying there, so they're not visible.
There's another option. Just stay away from tile roofs. Joking.
It's definitely my preferred option.
If the site survey goes to site and the homeowner says, I've only got 2 tiles left, take a photo or take one with you. And like we're going to break more than 2 tiles potentially. We're going to get another half a dozen. While you, like you say, if we're going past the wrecker's yard that we can pick up some, we'll grab some so we've got them here on the day.
And by the way, Velly, all the Northern Australians are going, what's a tiled roof?
Yeah. What are tiles? That's a good point. Look, on that note, this is, and because we'll be hopefully viewed all the way through Australia and New Zealand, because that's what our standards cover, including Fiji. An installation up in Darwin is a hell of a lot different from down here. You're talking, like, even with the feet spacings, you're talking cyclone proofing. And I was talking to one of the guys up in Darwin. He said, they're every 300 mil. I'm going, what? You put feet every 300 mil? I went, of course. Of course, it's the bloody cyclone.
You might actually have to put a new screw hole in that tin sheet.
Well, in the old days down here, they used to take the screw out and put the same one back in. But I think people don't do that anymore.
Hopefully they don't do that.
They put a bigger screw in. But it's like, because we're such a large continent, we're a small continent, a large country, we have all these different requirements for, the structural side of things. And I think in Northern Territory, it falls under the building code when it comes to actually doing installations. And we don't have cyclones down here. But in saying that, the weather's getting pretty hairy, so yes.
That's probably a good point. Like 1170.2, which is the wind loading standard in Australia, changed in 2020. I think it might have been 2020, and the only way it was implemented was in the building code. Basically, implemented it. A lot of installers are used to being the old 2S rule, which is 200 mil from the edge of the roof, not the gutter. Don't try and put your panels 200 mil from the edge of the gutter because you'll get knocked back. 1170.2 has a lot more nuance to it now, about building categories, importance factors, all that sort of stuff. It's too long to go into here, but if you can get onto some of the rail manufacturers that actually have specific training around it, it's really good information to learn. It's also good for installers because you might be able to get a couple extra panels if the customer needs it. You might need to do more feet or, closer to bracing to a lot closer together. But knowing that as well can help you in your site assessment too.
That's it. Yeah.
Definitely.
And there's so much support in industry too, Robbie. Like I often encourage people, installers, retailers, companies to lean on the support there is. And manufacturing suppliers, they're falling over themselves for your business. And they have great tools out there, great support teams, design engineering, like you were talking about with the racking, mounting manufacturers. A lot of them have really great calculators that people can use to work out all of the bill of materials they need, or they might even do it for you, or the supplier might do it for you, especially when you're new and getting used to it. So there's no excuse, really. People need to reach out for that support. Fair enough, they're busy in their day-to-day business and there's so much to know and do in our industry, but use that support that's available.
Yeah, I look at the actual rail and the feet is like tyres on your car. That's the only the tyres on your car, that's the only thing between you and the road, right? So have decent tyres. Don't be stingy on your tyres. You can have a rundown car, but have good tyres. And when you're affixing these giant sails, as Robbie pointed out before,
good brakes too, right?
Yeah, good brakes too. But these giant sails you can kill. There's been cases of panels left on roofs, on industrial roofs, and they just circle up 25, 30 metres and come barreling down.
Yep.
Right. You really want to make sure that if something happens, no one's going to get hurt, right? Because we've seen cases where the roof sheet is actually ripped off, and the panels are still attached, right? And then obviously I could go towards penetrative and non-penetrative approaches to the commercial affixing panels rail to roof. But it's really, really important that you're not stingy on that and you do it properly. And in the domestic situation, you got a little bit more of a go because of the wooden substructure in most cases. Whereas in a commercial, if you are penetrative, you're going to metal. You've only really got one go, and that's why a lot of people are going for that non-penetrative approach where it actually clamps on the rib. But still, at the end of the day, it's all weakest link, and forbid that a panel comes off and hurts, kills, or whatever. It's just really very scary stuff because they're heavy, dangerous things, and they're getting bigger.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing is we're starting to see more metal profile roofs, not just your standard corrugated used in domestic markets as well. We're getting the trim deck profiles where you do have to use those non-penetrative clamps, but you also know how to lift those sheets up too, because I see a lot of damage where people have tried to lift that sheet and they've crimped the sheet, and that creates another water ingress point and structurally damages the roof material. And trying to get that replaced, it's going to cost you.
You're right. The rule with corrugated roofs, if the roof is less than 10 degrees pitch, you cannot use a corrugated roof. Right? You have to go through one of those industrial profiles. But even then, it's again, you crimp something wrong, you damage something, you drop a panel on its edge, and you put a little hole in, or you scrape away the protective material and saying that's a rust point. Again, and there's ways around that too. I'll give you a little example of when you're drilling. If you're drilling with into metal, right, get a plastic, get a magnet, usually one of those ones, a telescopic. Put a plastic bag over it, and you just pick up the spore straight away when you finish. Bang, bang. I was shown that many years ago, and it's a great method.
It's great.
Oh, sorry.
A lot of that. A lot of the kits that the battery kits that installers use now, you can get little vacuums and stuff as well. And like if you can grab one of those, you don't want to scratch the tin. I think it's a big thing as well. You want to try and minimise the damage you do to the tin with that offcut, the drills and hole saws and things like that.
Well, I mean, you can always use masking tape over holes and things like that. If you're drilling something that's got a powder coating and you want to repowder coating, not so good. So there's, that is not necessarily a renewable energy approach. It's just your tool, smart tool usage and stuff. And we can wax lyrical about all people supposed to using PPE, but goggles with gaps or safety glasses where stuff comes in and bounces into their eye. It's like, come on, spend some dollars, have the right PPE.
That's it.
The other thing one more thing, like I often see this is people, if you drop a mid clamp or an end clamp or a screw and it ends up in the gutter, And you can see the rust spots in those gutters from those screws and end caps. Just if something slides off, get it. If it's safe to do so, get it.
It's actually what some of these finer points that really differentiates the great operators from the okay or not okay, the poor ones. You know, like the sort of crux of installing, you know, solar panels, batteries and stuff like that. Once you've got a bit of practice at it and you know your rules and things, like there's a lot of people that can do that well. But then those little things like that, as you say, cleaning up afterwards and just looking after the property, like that really separates those great operators, I think.
You're dead right, because what do people focus on? And I used to be in the building trade. My old man pointed this out to me, and I was like, okay, so you've done your job, you've done a fantastic job, and you're cleaning up. And the owner goes, okay, no, that's all right, I'll come and vacuum up and do whatever. And you go, oh, okay, and you leave. And so the next day they get asked, oh, how was the job? Oh, they did a fantastic job. You know something, though? I had to clean up after them.
Yeah.
Because people will focus on that. You should leave the place better than what you found it, right? No rubbish and no cut cable ties in the garden bed or disposed McDonald's or whatever. Just, you know, we've seen this. Or even worse, allowing plastic from panels to fly over someone's fence, because they are a stakeholder as well. They're part of the community. Yep. They have to be in the equation.
That's it, yeah.
Rubbish removal's a big one.
Yeah.
Especially in the commercial, because there's so much.
There's a lot of it.
Leave the place, yeah.
I think we've covered some good ground today, but before we sign off, I suppose it'd be great if there's any reflection points, any last, you know, what you think are quite critical from your own examples, your own experience that you think is important for people who are up and coming in industry that might be new to designing systems. Is there anything that you would offer as your last 10 cents?
Robbie?
I think don't be afraid to ask is probably a really good one. Like if you're working in a company that has more experienced people than you, ask them to come with you or show them your work and get a feedback on that opinion before you go. Work with your designer, work with your installer. If you're going to start as a site surveyor, you're going to be a designer one day, hopefully. Understand the process and work right to an installation. If you can get the chance to go along to an installation, go along to an installation.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just say one thing. I reckon it's with everything. It's like a case of walk before you can run.
Yeah.
You know, learn the basics, learn that process and procedure, which is applicable to everything we do in this world. If you've got these steps and you go, you're not looking for instant gratification. Oh, I can design the whole lot.
Yeah.
No, start basically, ask questions. I'm not sure about why you do this, and after a while, you'll know it fairly well. But of course, you'll always still be learning like we all are. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed speaking with both of you, and time's just, I've got no idea what time it is because I've just been talking. It's been great. So yeah,
the roast is in the oven, I think. Mate.
Don't say that. I'm getting hungry. We just had lunch a short time ago, didn't we? All right. No worries. See you later, everyone.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Bye.